Welcome back to the Language Attitude Lecture Part 2. In our previous lecture, we began discussing language attitude by explaining language attitude theory, the definition, and how language attitude influences language use, and vice versa. We also looked at the motivations influencing language attitude. In today's lecture, we will continue to study language attitude theory, looking at why we do study language attitude and how it impacts our work in language development. Finally, we'll take a look at the definitions of language maintenance, shift, and death. So after looking at language attitude, I think the question comes up, why study it? Why is it important? A leading researcher on language attitude, Colin Baker, reports the following. Language attitudes are important in sociolinguistic research, especially research for language planning. A survey of attitudes provides an indicator of current community thoughts and beliefs, preferences, and desires. Attitude surveys provide social indicators of changing beliefs and the chances of success in policy implementation. In terms of minority languages, attitudes, like censuses, provide a measure of health of the languages. Study of language attitudes can also be important for a language development project with an educational component. Any policy for language, especially in the system of education, has to take account of the attitude of those likely to be affected. In the long run, no policy will succeed which does not do one of three things: conform to the expressed attitude of those involved, persuade those who express negative attitudes about the rightness of the policy, or seek to remove the causes of disagreement. In any case, knowledge about attitudes is fundamental to the formulation of a policy as well as to success in its implementation. We've already established earlier in the lecture that language attitudes can be a marker of language use, but cannot predict language use. We can't predict language attitudes, but we can identify a few things that impact attitude. Roland Walker has identified some of the social forces shaping language attitude. Here they are on the screen. I've also provided this same visual in a PDF handout posted on the course website. In Roland's model, there are two opposing forces, those that are generally internal to the society and those that are external. These are some of the factors that mold the outcome of language attitudes and result in language choices. Generally speaking, inside forces work toward maintenance of the current language repertoire. Outside forces work toward a shift within or against the current language repertoire. One of the biggest criticisms of Walker's work is the apparent assumption that there is a direct link between expressed attitude and behavior, that by observing behavior we can infer attitude. However, people are not that simple. One of the most quoted research teams in language attitude, Borges, Giles, and Rosenthal, indicated in their 1981 article that objective indicators were not sufficient to account for a group member's intergroup attitude, skills, and motivations for learning a second language, attitude toward language use, and use of code switching strategies. In other words, we have to return to augmenting objective indicators, such as those observable inside and outside forces, with subjective indicators. But even with subjective indicators, asking people what they think, we may not be getting the whole situation. Let me go back to this previous slide here. So objective indicators are not sufficient to account for these things, and there needs to be some subjective indicators. This week you will be assigned a reading called Believe the Bird. This reading illustrates that you may not be getting the whole picture when you ask people what they think, that is, using objective indicators. As we stated earlier, language attitude will play a role in maintenance, shift, or death of a language. You'll read more about each topic this week, but before we end, let me take a moment to define each of these topics. Language maintenance and shift are long-term collective consequences of consistent patterns of language choice. That was in here in this previous slide. Language maintenance is the choice of members of a community to continue to use a language or languages in contexts they have traditionally been used within that community. Language shift is the phenomenon that is the result of individuals within a given community deciding to give up one language in favor of another one, or other ones, to use the new languages and domains formerly reserved for one that has been used in the past. Language death occurs when individuals within a community shift to a new language so totally that the old language is no longer used. Death is the endpoint of shift. Now that I've said that it is impossible to assess language attitude with 100% accuracy, I will hasten to add that we can still try. Remember, getting a handle on language attitude is very helpful when assessing whether to begin a language project or not. And that concludes our lectures on language attitude. We do not have a lecture in week 6, so I will see you back here for week 7.